Good morning, it's 11 o'clock. Welcome to your weekly Coffee with Diver webinar. This week, I would like to introduce you to Anthony Wright. Anthony works for DBI and he is one of the most experienced diver consultants in Ireland. Today, he's going to talk about the ODBC connector. His presentation will take around 15 minutes, and afterwards, we take a couple of minutes to answer your questions. You can use the Q&A panel at the bottom of your screen for asking questions. It's time for the webinar now. Anthony, good luck. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Lieven. Good morning, everyone. And I want to talk to you this morning about the DI ODBC connector. So if I click the right screen, the overview of what we're going to be talking about is what is an ODBC, what the DI ODBC can do for us, how do we set one up. I'm going to demo it in use, and then I'm going to discuss some interesting use cases for it. So what is an ODBC? ODBC is an open database connection. It's been around since 1992, and it's used to allow applications to talk to databases. So we're going to use it to talk to diver software. So what can an ODBC, the DI ODBC, do for us? Well, in our architecture, we allow for third-party ODBC connection into our data management and our business rule management systems. So we allow them into our C-bases, but we can also allow them into our measure factory. So they can access the same data that divers' own BI elements can access. So this will allow us to communicate with Spectre. By communicating with Spectre, we can talk to C-bases, C-plans, dives, so on and so forth. And it can allow us to import data into third-party applications with all your business rules already applied, because we can apply all those business rules into your C-base, into your measure factory, into your dives. So how do we set one up? Well, setting one up is pretty straightforward. There's a driver available from DI, and it will install a 32 and 64-bit version of the driver, so it's compatible with older and newer software. Then once that's done, we need to enable ODBC for your account. This is just once you have the license, we basically go into a user and we tick the box that says this user now has ODBC. To add an ODBC driver is a case of going to the ODBC data source administrator on your machine. We click add, we pick our DI ODBC, we give it a name. A name is how we're going to be able to identify it from our other applications. We tell it the server, the port, the usernames, the password, a project. With that done, we can then click browse, and then from the browse, we can browse the internals of our project to find the C-base that we want to connect to. We then save this, and then we can go into our application and open up the connection. So I'm going to do the dreaded live demo. I'll exit here. I come into the ODBC data administrator. I'm going to add dimensional insight ODBC, and it's going to be called DI ODBC. For the sake of this demo, I'm connecting to a local host. And my project is Diver BI. And I browse, go to my model folder, demo sales, I test my connection, and I save. So I now have a system-wide ODBC connection set up on my machine that will be able to talk to a C-base, but let's see that in action. So if I go to Excel, I can go to data, get data. I'm going to get it from other sources, because this will allow me to access ODBC. This will take a second as it loads .NET Framework in the background. Once the selection is opened, I can do DI ODBC, which is one we just created. I can click OK. This then goes off and reads the ODBC, which then presents back a table. this table is then the data that's contained in our CBase. So the system has expanded it out into a table so that Excel can understand it. I can then load this data. So in this instance, I'm only reading 2,676 records, but I should be able to insert, pivot, yes. And so I can create a pivot on this data. And let's say I wanted to filter by month, and I want this, and I want that. So I can now pick 1 month worth of data for a particular sales branch. And if I open this exact view in my CBase, I would see the same data because it's both the same source of data. There's going to be no breakdown of the rules or the logic because it's already defined. We're not giving someone access to the raw backend and they're having to interpret the data. It's already prepared for them. So what I also want to show then is if I do a file, a new. So many of us are going to have multiple data sources or multiple CBases that we want to interact with. We don't want to have to set up an ODBC connection each time we want to talk to a different one. So what we have is we have the option to use the C plan. So if I do the same thing again, if I go to ODBC, but this time I open the one I prepared earlier, which is my C plan version, and I click OK. You will notice that what I get different down here is I now have multiple inputs. So I can add named CBases into the C plan, and they will appear as individual tables. So you could imagine creating a C plan to act as almost like a dive book or a menu of different data sources. Okay, so if I return to my PowerPoint. Okay, so we just went through our demo, and what we did is we set up an ODBC connection in Windows. We opened Excel, and then from Excel we connected into that ODBC and read back some of the data. But there's many use cases in which we could use this connector. So we've just used Excel, but we could also, instead of connecting into a single CBase or a C plan, we can connect into a dive script. We can also connect into a measure factory. So we could connect in and pull a complete KPI out of the measure factory. Other documented applications that we could be using is we could be pulling the data out of a CBase into our R scripts to do our high-level analytics. We could be doing the same with Python if you want to do some heavy mathematical stuff. We could use something like Tableau, PowerBI, and many more tools just to do the visualization, as the business logic has already been figured out. But another useful use case is legacy systems. So some of us are going to have systems that don't communicate with other systems. They aren't open by ODBC. There's no way to communicate with them other than their own front end. But what you could do is with Diver, you could put a layer between you and that system where Diver reads that old system based on weird files or whatever, convert it into a CBase, and then allow you and your users to see that data via the ODBC connection. So let's say you have an old warehousing system and you have a modern, let's say like a finance system, and the finance system needs to know at the end of the month what the stock holding or the value in the warehouse is. Traditionally, it's been someone going into the warehousing system and basically typing everything out into Excel and then passing that Excel into the finance system. Well, you could put Diver in the middle. We can read that warehouse system, compile the CBase, and then your finance system can read the CBase and get whatever data it needs. Another interesting use case is to use it as an alternate data source. So let's say we have our own internal teams who need access to our own database, but their constant queries and investigations are slowing us down. They're sort of harassing the system, causing peaks where our own end users are having trouble. So what we can do is we can put the the CBase in between them and the database. So you could have the CBase updating every so often, drawing the data down into the CBase, and then the users can run their queries against the Diver CBase. So you could essentially have like a replication of your database that they can access without harassing the main system. Okay. So there's some notes to come along with this. Some of the features, the high-end kind of Power BI and so forth visualizations, they mostly came online with 7.1.7. Your ACL rules are applied. So as a result of setting up a user in Diver and then setting up with the ODBC, if they're only allowed to see one region, one product category, they will only see that one region or that category via the ODBC. Single sign-on is also supported in the ODBC, and there's some available documentation online on the Domin's website, which can give you more detail. And if you go into using the ODBC, it also gives you examples on how to connect it to the various applications that I mentioned earlier in the presentation. So I appear to have not taken up too much of anyone's time. That went a bit quicker than I had expected. So at this point, I would like to say that I am the penultimate, and our ultimate session in this series will be next week. And it's a friend from InfoTools Sweden, Ola Nyberg, who will be talking to us about dive port documents and inputs. So I guess I'll hand it back to Lieven.
Thank you very much, Anthony. We're not finished yet. We have a couple of questions. Let me see. First one is from Peter. He'd like to know, are there any limitations in terms of data volumes?
When it comes to the data volumes, it's mostly going to be your third-party application. So if your application can only process a few 100,000 or 1 million rows of data, then that will be your limit. The ODBC will pass you all the data you request.
Okay. There's another question from Julia. She would like to know how the ODBC connector is licensed.
It's done as a named user. So you would basically, you buy an additional sort of add-on that is a tick box for a different each individual user. Some other scenarios would exist. So you'd be best to sort of discuss with your local contact what you're aiming to achieve.
Okay. Thank you very much, Anthony. That was a nice, compact presentation. I must compliment you with your radio voice. You have a very pleasant voice to listen at.
Thanks very much.
So that's all for today. I hope to see you all or meet you all next week during the last webinar of this series about documents and input functionality. So have a nice day, and until then, bye for now.